Good evening, folks. I was laughing at our title, The Relief Pitcher. This is a sports show, a religious show. As you know, during elections, it's a political show. And then I have Robert Erringer and other writers on and artists, and I have the Quins on doing Irish music. So I defy anybody to say this is any show except what Worthen likes. You know, it's all about me. No, it's all about my guests. This is Worthen One. I'm Jim Worthen. We're here every Friday night, 7 to 8 p.m. We are on again Monday on Channel 17 at 1 p.m. and repeated Tuesday and Wednesday at 5 p.m. But that's just the beginning. That's the way it was when I first started doing this. Now we're going out on Facebook right now. We will be a great place to get us is you can go to the website TVSB, go to the demand section and search Worthen One. I'm told we'll be there on the internet forever, which terrifies my protege. My granddaughter says I'll be embarrassing my great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter in 200 years, like I embarrass her. And then we go on Vimeo. And so again, you go on Vimeo and search Worthen One, and there'll be many shows there. My show this evening is another Presbyterian sojourn. I'm a proud Presbyterian. That's a Christian church, by the way, but I love its structure of government, its polity, which was used by Madison to write our Constitution. The balance of powers, different people doing different things, checks and balances. And so my guest this evening is our relief pitcher, our new interim pastor, Charles Svendsen.
Svendsen, correct.
I don't pronounce Worthen, so don't expect me to.
Okay, all right. Hard for me too.
Yeah, and I don't call you Chuck, I call you Charles.
Charles.
Where were you born, Charles?
I was born at the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital in Los Angeles at Sunset and Vermont on June 9th, 1951, which makes me a young 68.
You don't look that old.
Thank you.
I think you have great genes.
Thank you. I try to walk and eat right and go to the fitness club and do all those good things.
Well, I didn't do all those good things. I drink an awful lot. I smoke when I shouldn't. I gain weight every year.
You look good to me.
And I have great genes.
Good.
People can never guess my age, never, until I start talking about my great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. What did your parents do?
My father was a congregational minister in Montrose, just above Glendale, California. He was in his first church for 32 years. And my mother was a Navy nurse, so we could never fake, sickness. She knew what sickness and what fakery was. And they raised 4 lively children in the community of La Cañada. Just next to Pasadena.
So you're really an Angelino down there.
I'm an Angelino, a Southern Californian. That's right.
Schooling?
I went to Wheaton College in Illinois.
Wait, start with elementary school.
La Cañada Elementary School.
Public school.
Public schools. Foothill Intermediate School. That was our junior high in the community. And then La Cañada High School, which was a newly built school when I went in the 60s.
That area was growing during that time. That's why they had to...
It was growing, and we were a part of Pasadena and wanted our own school district, so we came over there. But the town of La Cañada has been about 20,000 for the last 50 years.
Really?
It's been a very stable community to grow up in.
Now, siblings?
Older sister, younger brother, and my mom was the daughter of a pastor in Los Angeles at Church at the Open Door at 6th and Hope, connected with Biola University. He was the pastor there and president later of Biola. And My brother was a Baptist pastor and my cousin's a Presbyterian pastor.
A lot of pastoring there.
A lot of pastoring there, but it's been wonderful.
It's a great calling.
It is.
And I can tell with people who aren't in the ministry, how they feel about their family can tell you who the person is. You know, people come in. I've had people almost break down crying talking about their parents.
Yeah.
And I said, I remind them of the Bible scripture, raise a child in the way of the Lord, which their parents did.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but you got to remember the second part because it's important to me. And they are older.
They will not depart from it. Yeah, yeah.
And they will live long in the land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did you're here in beautiful Southern California? Tied to Biola, Oxy's down there.
Mm-hmm.
But, why Wheaton?
My father is a Wheaton grad. My grandfather was an honorary Wheaton grad. It was in our family. My backup school was Oxy, and accepted to both, but too many of my friends from La Cañada were going to Occidental, so I thought...
Rebellion
at Wheaton. Studied philosophy and had a wonderful experience there, sang in their men's glee club and made many, many friends.
Wheaton is in Illinois.
25 miles west of Chicago.
Well, that's where I'm from. I shouldn't have said Illinois because that's Cook County. That's not part of my state.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But was there a tie in your family to Illinois?
That was through my dad, a Wheaton grad, and my mom attended there a couple of years, and then my grandfather. But no, I don't have any roots in the Midwest. And when I went to Wheaton, I thought these people, no offense, were a little backward. I was a Californian. So I took my sophomore year at UCSD and then went back to Wheaton to finish up my junior.
UCSD or B?
D.
San Diego.
Sorry, San Diego, yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting. So when did your family come to Southern California? Your dad? Where you come from, you outsiders?
Svendsen is a Norwegian name, and my grandfather was from Bodø, Norway, north of the Arctic Circle. My grandmother from Stockholm. So the Norwegians and the Swedes can get together, and they did, and had 7 children.
1,000 Swedes ran through the weeds,
chased by one Norwegian, right?
So
or the other way around.
He caught her.
he caught her on the boat coming in to Ellis Island, and they were married and settled in Elgin, Illinois. And my dad was born under the old watch factory, if you got an Elgin watch.
So there was some Illinois there.
There was some Illinois, and then they came out to California in 1925.
Did they come to California? They came before the war. Did they come for the ministry?
They came after the war. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was stone deaf from the age of 12, and he learned to read your lips, first of all in Norwegian, and then learn to read your lips in English, having never heard the language.
Grandfather?
Grandfather.
I've never heard of this. Bilingual in lip reading.
He was bilingual in lip reading and in writing. He couldn't speak because he was deaf, but if you came into the shop, he was a shoe repairman at Pico in Vermont and Los Angeles for 45 years. And if you came into the shop and asked for your shoes to be repaired, he would read your lips. And during the Depression, people didn't buy new shoes. They simply resold and rehealed. So that was his livelihood.
We just showed our age.
We did.
I said they didn't come out here for the war, and you said they came after the war.
After the First War.
Right, after the First World
War. The Great
War.
War.
Yes. The war to end
the
all
war
wars.
to end all wars.
And we never have seen that.
Yeah.
There's only one peacemaker.
That's right.
So you're at Wheaton, you're studying philosophy.
I'm at Wheaton, I'm studying philosophy. I'm thinking either of teaching, or I would sketch and paint as a kid. I thought I might be going into art.
Have you quit that?
You know, I have for many, many years, and I'm trying to get back to it of sketching and drawing. It's been in fits and spurts over the years.
Well, we have, not that you will have a lot of free time, but we have some great adult education arts classes here. A friend who's been on the show many times, Thomas Van Stein. He's a nocturnal painter.
Okay.
I've commissioned him to do a couple of paintings only because I was forced to, but he does great night scenes. And
I'll have to find that.
And he teaches at City College.
Okay. Well, someone gave me a ticket, a pass to the Santa Barbara Art Museum, and I've already been a couple of times. So it's
under
splendid.
construction.
Yeah.
It's
wait till it opens up.
It's been a blessing. Of course, when your grandfather was doing shoes, and that was the post office in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay, all right,
And then it moved over to where the post office is today.
Got it.
In the 30s. I think the WPA, they had to build things and keep.
Well, I was in that post office yesterday because I'm renewing my passport. I'm going to be doing some traveling this summer, and I need to get that passport.
So you're at Wheaton. You're going to be sort of like Ernest Hemingway with art. You're going to be a philosophical artist, like he was a philosophical writer.
Something like that. Yeah.
And where'd you go wrong?
Sadly, I lost two friends, one to a cancer and one to a terrible hitchhiking accident. And when you're 19, 20, 21, and you lose friends like that, you think about life. And I thought about my philosophy, I thought about the ministry, and my dad arranged for me to go out to Lincoln, Kansas between my sophomore and junior years to do a student pastorate in a small congregational church. And I went out there and did that summer and absolutely fell in love with parish ministry.
The hottest day I ever experienced in my life was a morning in Lincoln, Kansas.
You've been in Lincoln, Kansas?
Oh, just going through.
Yes, yeah. It's a wide spot in the road, but lovely people, ate so well, fresh tomatoes and sweet corn and steak and just...
So this California kid, and we need more of this today, because the people on the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard don't realize the wonderful people there in between.
No, it's the flyover states, aren't they? Yeah.
And completely out of touch with us, as both socially and politically.
Yeah.
Although one of the things I hate in life is I can remember going to it was a Presbyterian conference summer for 2 weeks at the Valley of the Moon in Northern California.
Okay.
It's the Presbyterian conference ground there, and I roomed with a boy from Texas, and it took me 2 months afterwards to lose my twang. Now, TV and radio's ruined all that.
Well, the Heartland people are lovely and they're welcoming, and I found nothing but goodness in them that summer.
Well, they're Bible thumpers, and
well, these people weren't.
So you come back
then
from
went back to Wheaton, served another student pastorate in Monroe Center, which is south of Rockford, Illinois, about 80 miles away from the college, and I would go out there on the weekends.
Was it north or south 80?
More west and a little north from Wheaton, and I would go out on the weekends, and I would spend my summers there. And then when I went to seminary...
When did you decide to go to seminary?
My senior year of Wheaton. So I thought, well, I'll go to seminary and maybe use it to teach, or maybe go into parish ministry, just not sure. So I chose Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, a good Calvinistic, Reformed, Presbyterian, no-nonsense school rigorous academically.
Not a congregational like your
No,
dad.
no, not a congregational.
Presbyterian.
But he went to Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia, so there was a family connection there.
Yeah.
And spent 4 solid years, well, 3 seemed like 4, 3 years at Westminster. And while there, served a Mennonite church north of campus near Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and fell in love with these Anabaptists, these radical reformers, theologically and politically. They're wonderful people, the Mennonites. They're pacifists, believe in a separation of church and state, and very dear people.
I hate to do this. This is your show, but my dad and I argued. He was a Hard Rock Baptist before he became a Presbyterian. And he was saying, that's the real church, John the Baptist. And I said, no, Dad, it's the Anabaptist reformers. That's where the Baptists spun out of. And no, it's... And they didn't, and Jesus didn't drink wine, he drank grape juice. And I said, yeah, and that's how Alexander lost 300 men one night in a drunken within 90 miles of Jerusalem.
Right.
The Mennonites, have you
I didn't know.
visited them in the Central Valley?
I didn't know. Oh no, I haven't. I know they're here.
Yeah, Central Valley. Yeah.
But I spent 6 years with them in Pennsylvania. I finished up at Westminster in '76, and then went over to Princeton Seminary to do a master's in American history. And so I served this Mennonite church, the Deep Run Mennonite Church West, as their interim pastor, then their called pastor, and finished up at Princeton in '79 studying history, and then moved up into Connecticut.
The Mennonites accepted you as an interim pastor?
They said, don't make us Presbyterians. We're Mennonites. And so I learned from them and have dear friends.
There's a Christian health system. It's got 400 or 500 members, dialect, Bible, and it's a joint self-insuring, and it's qualified.
Oh, Mennonite Mutual.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
We
It
had
was
that in
started by
insurance.
the Mennonites.
Yeah, right.
And it's growing and growing and growing. Because,
I had my car insurance with them and my home insurance with them.
I have a friend who also was grandparents were from Norway, who joined them and began to pay in, and in the 3rd month he became very ill and had about $100,000 in bills. And it just terrified him, because this wasn't insurance. This was a group of Christians who were going to take care of other people's bills.
Yeah.
Paid.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
And so it's...
I've always said, if you want strong preaching, go to the Presbyterians. If you want caring, loving people, the Mennonites.
Yeah. So you're finishing your 4 years between between
3 years at Westminster, and then 3 years at Princeton.
Oh, you did 6 years in seminary. Slow learner?
Slow learner, yes. Takes me a while to catch on.
So besides your spiritual growth as a pastor and a minister, you were studying history.
I was studying history with a fine, able scholar there. And but that was really more a avocation. I didn't think I was going to academics.
Well, you needed the history, the Calvinist history for the Mennonites. And
Sure, yeah. And of course the East Coast is full of history, and you can just turn the corner and there you are.
Well,
but so is Santa Barbara. When the Revolutionary War was happening, your mission was also beginning.
Yeah. And those immigrants coming here.
Yeah.
The Chumash are still wondering about it. But,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you're finished with your education. Where did
Not quite. I went
You're
from.
still studying, okay.
Well, you're always studying. If you're in life, you're always studying something.
Or you should be.
Should be, yeah. So then I went up to Thompson, Connecticut, which is in the northeast corner of Connecticut, the quiet corner, and served a beautiful parish called the Thompson Congregational Church, which was in the United Church of Christ. and I served that congregation for 4 years as their settled pastor. So moved.
Settled pastor?
Well, their permanent pastor.
Oh, so you went up there.
I left Deep Run Mennonite Church after 6 years, went up to Thompson, and served there for 4 years. Lived in the parsonage across from the green. The church sat on the common with the tall steeple and the clock and the bells. It was a 1856 wooden white clapboard church. Parish was founded in 1730. So old communities.
Wonder if any of my relatives went there.
Okay,
No, we
okay.
stayed away from Connecticut.
Okay, all right.
Although there's a rumor that Longfellow's witch was an aunt of mine.
Oh, there you
Yeah, they killed her. Terrible people.
go. Oh,
But that's another story.
Yeah, the story. Yeah.
I love history. I really do.
So served there as their young bachelor pastor, and loved that community as well. And while there, decided to do a doctorate in ministry, called a Doctor of Ministry, at Union Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia.
Right.
Old Union. So I would take my 1978, 2002 BMW, and I'd drive it down 95, take my courses, and drive back. And I was back and forth.
It'd be like going from LA to San Francisco, wouldn't it?
Something
Almost.
like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Only had to go through the Baltimore Tunnel and through New York and things
So-
like that.
So far, you've served Mennonite, Congregational, Church of Christ.
Well, Congregational Mennonite, and now United Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're a Presbyterian.
Well, that came later.
Oh.
That came later.
You got away from Princeton without being ordained as a Presbyterian
I
minister.
did. I got away from both Westminster, Princeton, and Union without being ordained as a Presbyterian minister because I was serving happily in the United Church of Christ, which is a sister Reformed body. But then about 2 years into those 4 years, I started getting restless. And I talked to some people and I said, how do I kind of move every couple of years? And they said, oh, you can't do that. So I finished up in Thompson and I moved to Scotland and served as an assistant minister in the Church of Scotland for 16 months with a very able pastor, head of staff, former moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland.
It's a Presbyterian type church, isn't it?
It's the mother church of the Presbyterians. So we all came from the Church of Scotland. John Knox came there in 1560 to found the Presbyterian Church. He was converted by Calvin in Geneva before that.
Right.
And the Presbyterian Church is flourishing, or was, in Scotland. So
Right.
served there with Bill Johnston for those 16 months.
I have dear Irish friends, the Quins, and I have to keep telling Willie, we Scottish Presbyterians weren't bad. In fact, the Presbyterians fought with you Catholics against the Brits in
Yeah.
Southern Ireland. And the Jews and the Presbyterians and the Catholics revolted against the British, just like we did here. He isn't buying it because
Yeah.
of the North Ireland problem, but yeah.
I got beaten up by Patrick Quinn when I was in 4th grade. Any relation?
Probably not.
Probably not.
because- but it's a great Irish name.
It is.
Uh,
It is.
There was a talk show host in LA, Tom Dugan. I don't know if
I
you
know that
ever-
name, yeah, yeah.
And he was a devout Catholic, and one of his talking, he said, it was the Presbyterians who taught us to put bombs in the mailboxes. And I told Willie that, and he says, oh, we didn't even have mailboxes out where we lived. I said, no, the boxes that the Brits came to get the mail to distribute is what we blew up.
Oh, okay, all right. So I'm in Scotland. I'm enjoying that. Almost stayed in Scotland to become a member. I was a minister member of the Church of Scotland while I was there.
So you were ordained there?
I was ordained by the Mennonites, transferred my paperwork to the United Church of Christ, and then had dual citizenship, sort of, with the Church of Scotland. And while there, I finished up my paper on the nature and practice of interim ministry, which was my major project for Union Seminary.
And you really hadn't been an interim
Really,
minister.
not really,
You
but
had
I was
been
but I was
6
studying.
years, 4
Yeah,
years.
I'm studying it, and I'm thinking, well, why don't we go to Australia?
That makes sense.
Why not? Why not? So
There's no Presbyterians in Australia.
there are few, but I joined the Uniting Church in Australia, which
Uniting
is
Church.
a Uniting Church in Australia, which is a 1972 merger of all the Congregationalists, all the Methodists, and most of the Presbyterians. They merged in an early merger, and so every town had a Uniting Church. And I served for 7 months in the city of Sale, S-A-L-E, in the state of Victoria, outside of Melbourne, and served the Uniting Church there. And then after I finished that, I said, why not, I'm down in this neighborhood, why not go over to New Zealand?
Why not?
Why not?
I thought this was a religious show.
It's like a
and it's a travel log. I love it. Go ahead.
Went over to the South Island and served in Nelson,
What church?
the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, finally.
Phew. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
You're almost 40.
Well, yeah, I'm in my mid-30s.
Yeah, okay. And you finally see the light.
Finally get to a Presbyterian church.
At least I was worried you were going to slip into the Episcopalian somewhere.
Well, my
along
sister
there.
has, so she's the Episcopalian for our family. Then I came back to East Woodstock, Connecticut, and served in the United Church of Christ, the Congregational Church in East Woodstock, and then got trained to be an interim pastor. And I took week 1 and week 2, and there's a group called the.
Now, where was this again?
This is in Woodstock, Connecticut.
Okay.
I'm back in
You're
the States.
back,
Back in the States now. I know. I'm not quite.
You
I'm not
can't
quite.
tell the players without a scorecard.
Yeah, it's going to
you
get
know?
more complicated, Jim. It's going to get more.
More
Yeah, it's going to get
complicated?
more complicated than this.
Okay, so you're a Presbyterian?
No, I'm still a UCC. I'm still a United Church of Christ pastor.
So you were only a Presbyterian for a few months?
Just for a few months in New Zealand, but I'm going to come back to it. And
Okay.
It's going to circle back. So I'm in East Woodstock. I get trained to be an interim pastor, and I was shepherded by a gentleman named Roger Nicholson, who's been kind of the dean of interim pastors for.
No relation to our guy, producer Mike Nicholson.
nor Jack Nicholson. No, none of that, no relation. And so he shepherded me. In fact, he wrote a book called The Temporary Shepherds, which is what we are. We're temporary shepherds. And I got trained and certified to be an interim pastor, and you're now my 24th interim.
Not counting all those previous churches?
Not counting those previous churches.
But there were 5 or 6 there.
Right. So you
At
can count.
least.
You can count maybe 28, 29 churches.
Why do they throw you out? No,
I-
you come when other people are leaving.
I come between pastors. I'm the relief pitcher. So a pitcher goes 5 innings. They bring me in for 2 or 3 innings, and then they bring in the closer. So I've followed very, very successful pastors and churches. Sometimes not so. The majority of pastors and churches I've followed are in healthy and good situations. They just need a little direction. They need some help during this interim time.
There was an article in, if people Google you, they'll find it in the LA Times, and it covered several different interim pastor circumstances, but it keyed off you. But it talked about problem churches and embezzlement and the adult, just all the problems that can happen. Have you ever had to go into a church that was in that kind of disrepair?
I have, but those are the exceptions. Most of the churches I go into are happy and healthy, and they've simply lost their pastor through retirement or through a pastor moving on to another place. And they're in an anxious place because they don't know what the future is.
Yeah.
And I come in as their transitional pastor. In fact, I like that word transitional better because it really defines what we're doing. We're taking the congregation through a time of transition. And we're ensuring that things are going to be taken care of. The pulpit's going to be covered, the pastoral care is going to be there, the staff is going to be supervised. But there are also other things that interim pastors do. We do 5 basic things. We look at a church's history, where have they come from? And First Pres Santa Barbara is celebrating their 150th, so you've done a lot of history taking. Secondly, a new identity. Who are you without your previous pastor? What's God calling you to do and be in the next 3 to 5 years?
Cause the identity, and now
Right, now that pastor is gone, now who are you? And you have a new board of leadership. Where is God calling you to be? Thirdly, you are going to give leadership in the congregation a rest. Jim, thank you for being on the board of facilities for 30 years. We thank you. Now you need to take a well-deserved sabbatical.
But it's another Jim.
It's well, yeah.
But
it's you. And now Sally over here is going to come serve as the pastor nominating committee, and she's going to be the one helping find a new pastor. So leadership changes during that transitional time, and I'm helping to bless you for serving 30 years, and welcome Sally to come in and do some new ministry.
This is sort of what I talked about, my love of the polity of the church.
Yeah.
The pastor is the president in our Constitution.
Right.
The presidential, the power of the presidency. The session is like the Senate.
Yes.
And the Board of Deacons used to be more than it is today, the purse strings.
Yeah.
The House of Representatives.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I love your description, because it's like we've had a change of administration.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the relief pitcher. There's a whole team of 8 other people out there playing on our side, and I use session as the governing body of the church. I use the presbytery, the committee on ministry, as a guidance. I use the deacons, and so it's a check and balance.
Right, and you referred to the presbytery. It's like we're the city, there's the state, and here's the General Assembly, the
national
federal
level. Yeah,
that I'm going to lead a revolution. No,
yeah.
We've had some problems.
Right.
And
so I came over to the Presbyterian Church in 1997. I was moving from the East Coast. I had served interims in Maine, in Connecticut, in New York.
Those interims you weren't doing as a Presbyterian?
I was a UCC, a United Church of Christ pastor, as an interim, but I'm going to mess you up a little bit here, Jim.
Try.
I served a Quaker meeting in Whittier, California.
Richard Nixon's church.
Well, he was at East Whittier. This is First Friends. This is the mother church on Philadelphia, near the college.
Okay.
I served there for 2 years as an interim. They said, again, we're Quakers, we're friends, don't make us Presbyterians, don't make us Congregationalists, okay? And then I also served a Reformed church in Schenectady.
Reformed Church of America?
Yes, yes.
There was a time in my life that it's the same, the Dutch Reformed.
The Dutch Reformed, yes.
Calvinistic.
Yes.
Same kind of polity.
Yes, same kind of, they have a consistory instead of a session.
Yeah.
So I served there for a year in Schenectady at the old Mother First Reformed Church. It was a lovely spot, cold in the winter. Ooh.
But you only had to be there a year or two.
Only have to be a year, yeah, yeah.
So in 97,
you
pledged yourself to take care of Presbyterians.
I did. I went to the other team. I went to the dark side. No, the good. Well, whatever. It's a different team on in the same league. Went up there to Bellingham, Washington, and served the St. James Presbyterian Church. I was there almost 2 years.
I know the area well.
Yeah, yeah.
And where from there?
From there, my parents were aging, so I went down to La Crescenta. My parents were in La Cañada, so I served the La Crescenta Presbyterian Church, the La Mirada Presbyterian Church, Community Presbyterian Church of La Mirada, San Juan Capistrano.
I was afraid you were becoming the La minister, but go ahead.
I know. A lot of Pacific Palisades Presbyterian, Brentwood Presbyterian.
Who was the transition at Brentwood?
Charles Shields was the longtime pastor there. Another pastor.
Where was Don Mumau?
He was at Bel Air,
Bel Air.
across the way.
You didn't replace him, did you?
No, didn't replace Don Mumau. He's over there and Brentwood's over here.
Okay.
And then went north to First Presbyterian Church of Portland, Oregon. Served there 18 months. It's the cradle church up there. And then went down to the Congregational Church in Portland, over in the Park Blocks.
Backsliding, huh?
Yeah, backsliding into the Congregationalists. And then said, New Zealand is calling again. So went down to New Zealand for 12 months.
That's the United Church.
That's the Presbyterian Church.
Oh.
Went back.
Oh,
now I'm a
yeah.
Presbyterian minister, so I can go back and serve in the Presbyterian Church. So
Right.
I did that.
The United Church was in Australia.
It's a little confusing. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw you two more curveballs. I'm a relief pitcher, so
Yeah.
I'm throwing curves. And then I come back to Westlake Village. You know where that is?
Yes.
Near Thousand Oaks.
Right.
Served there 23 months. Served Costa Mesa Church 20 months. Followed a beloved pastor of 23 years. Beloved pastor in Westlake Village as well of 19 years. And then I'm following Reverend Bueller of 16 years
Right.
here at First Pres Santa Barbara.
Did you ever have to, we talked about the scandalous losses of ministers that of course weren't really Presbyterians. If you read the whole article, they were other
Methodists things,
the Methodists, maybe some Lutherans thrown in there. But did you ever have to, the other reason other than retirement is the death of a minister. Did you ever have to step into
I did step into that in Schenectady. Their pastor died at age 51 of pancreatic cancer. And he died in June, and I arrived in September. And they were just blown away with grief.
Yeah.
So we had some small groups, we had table talks, we had holy conversations about Pastor Smith.
Now, you're coming at the First Presbyterian Church. Now, remember, I love the polity, but Bueller left. Peter, wonderful man. He promised to be at my bedside when I die, but I'm worried I'll be at his bedside.
I had lunch with him a couple days ago. He's a prince, just a wonderful guy.
But we have a very strong assistant pastor, Eric.
Associate pastor.
Yeah. That has made our waiting to call you easier.
Yes. He filled in for 14 months and did a splendid job.
Oh, and he grew so. And of course, many of us want to ignore the polity and make him our minister.
Well, you can make him your minister. The polity was changed a few years ago. You'll need a 3/4 vote of the presbytery for him to submit his name, but he can be considered for this.
Maybe he doesn't want us. That's possible.
Anything is possible.
But I came, my hubris. The world's all about me except for Christ when he gets involved. And so I came after 3 or 4 months and we hadn't called an interim pastor. And I said, well, all this timing with the internet and social media, we don't have to take 2 years of interim and then call a pastor and have it be 3 years before we replace Peter.
Yeah.
We've got our man here, and we can, things can be done rapidly. And Eric said,
no,
that's not the reason.
Both Peter and Eric said together that we need to honor the process.
Yeah, and the process allows us to, there are many people that were at the church only because of Peter for years. The process is the weaning of I had a wonderful Presbyterian minister who is no longer in the ministry. He's gone into foundations, and I once tried to get him to run for office. And he said, Jim, it would be impossible for me. It would destroy me. I said, why? He said, I have enough problem when I give my sermon on Sunday morning and 700 people idolize me. What it does to the ego to have people think I'm great. And he says, it's a real problem. Well, that's the reason for interim ministry.
Well, I think an interim pastor is a person with less ego than most, because we come in to do a job, specifically to move the ball from A to B. We're trying to move in that trend. It's not about us. And really, it's not about us anyway. It's about the gospel. Right. It's about the honoring of God.
What he was trying to say, though, is that is the kind of thing that is a problem when a minister leaves the church. There's these people that have been idolizing that minister.
Yeah.
And
maybe that's a good...
the reason for the timing.
Yeah. That is a good reason for timing. Also, it's a loss to a church to lose their beloved minister. I had a woman in my office in Pacific Palisades who was a journalism student at Northwestern. And she said, I wonder why you just don't get a new pastor right away. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what if your dad died? How would you feel about your mom remarrying in a month?
Ooh, what a great
How about
simile.
How about 6 months? How about a year? How about 2 years? She goes, maybe 2 years. Well, churches are like families, and they lose a beloved member of their family, and you just don't replace them, the next Monday morning. Yeah. And it takes the interim, and we do a lot of counsel with churches that grieve, and rightly so, their last pastor, and that process takes time.
Well, and
so my average time with the church is about 18 months, 18 to 20 months. It might be shorter in your case because I didn't arrive until 14 months after Peter retired, and Eric's been doing an admirable job. And I look forward to the next at least 12 months with you.
Well, and the lesson in all this is that it isn't the president, the pastor.
It's not about the pastor.
It's the fellowship.
It's the community.
Congregation.
It's the family of faith. Yeah, that's right.
And so you've stepped into one that has a variety of experience, mm-hmm. a variety of needs. Mm-hmm. When when we marched up State Street from our old site to this site, this is a church that...
you go way back, don't you?
Oh, even further back than that. The facility of that church was built in an era and with an understanding. I tell people that when First Pres was across from the library downtown, and when the plan for this church occurred, we were the biggest Protestant church from the LA County line to the San Jose, mm-hmm. The whole coast, and Our Lady of Sorrows, our Catholic church downtown, was the biggest Catholic church, I'm told, in that era. And so that we had almost 3,000 members, and that's what and we have an incredible campus, incredible facility that sadly is underused.
You have 45,000 square feet.
An acre. I learned that in real estate.
An acre, okay. I live in a 546 square foot cottage. So, 100 times is the size of this plant.
Yeah.
Built in the 70s, in the heyday of the church. Another thing we interims do is that we remind the congregation that we're in a huge sea change in terms of Christendom. No longer do you build a church and people will simply come. It's a cultural shift. And now we're trying to figure out what is God's Spirit saying to the church in a post-Christian age.
Well, I had this discussion with Peter, and we'll have a little of it right now. And I think that the fake news, if you will, tells us that this is a post-Christian age. But in fact, I said to Peter, probably 40% of the people in Santa Barbara go to church each Sunday. We've got a congregation of 400. I said, but there's probably 120 churches, some of them as small as 10 people, very few over 1,000.
Yeah.
I said, take us as an average and multiply us times 120.
Yeah.
And I said, now, other places, according to Gallup's survey of 30,000 people every 2 years, 80% of the people pray every day, they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some 5% of the people go to church every week. Now, not in Santa Barbara, but in our country. So I wonder, are we really in a post-Christian era? Or are we in a new ministry era?
I think we're in an exile era. You remember when the children of Israel were exiled into Babylon, and then they came back and they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. I think we're in a place that we're no longer in David's temple. We're certainly no longer in Solomon's temple. We're not in the 40s and 50s and 60s. We're now in this exile time that we're coming back and
to rebuild.
To rebuild.
Okay.
And the
Then
church.
we're on the same page.
And the church is going to look very different. It may not have 45,000 square foot of building. It might be in pubs. It might be in homes. It might be in recreational halls.
Been there before.
Been there before. Been there before. In fact, there's a revival in the English church of pub ministry, having conversations over a beer, talking with people about spiritual things, not in a church setting.
Well, I think one of the things of our secular part of our society has caused people in my political party, in Christendom, to be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
And
it's the most interesting thing on the planet to talk about.
And it's amazing. You sit down with somebody, they start talking about it, and it's not, oh, I don't believe in any of that, or I hate Trump, or it's all of a sudden there's people that have the same beliefs. And
if you have conversations with people in a non-judging way, in a loving way, in a gracious way, and really listen to them. And that's another thing that interims do. We listen to the congregation, where they feel God's calling them in the next 3 to 5 years. And then we help shape that through a mission study and a mission statement and a vision. And then we charge our pastor nominating committee to go find a person that will lead us into where we think God wants us to go. Not just the best preacher they can hear, or not just somebody who looks like their boyhood preacher.
Were we getting to come into your present calling and the present challenge? The facility with the right kind of bands and the right kind of outreach, and we could go back to 1,000, 2,000 members, but is that the calling?
Maybe God's calling us to something else. Maybe God's calling us to do low-income housing. Maybe God's calling us to do more with our homeless community. Maybe God's calling us to link up with other congregations. Maybe there's a racial ethnic congregation that wants to use our facility.
And that has been a Presbyterian tradition.
Yeah.
When I came to Santa Barbara, the Korean Presbyterian Church and met at our church on Saturday. And right now we have an Ethiopian
church, right?
And so you're suggesting that one possibility is our facility should be used by more than just First Presbyterian Church.
Could Seventh-day Adventists, they worship on Saturday? Wouldn't that be wonderful to welcome our Seventh-day Adventist friends? Or a Spanish-speaking congregation, so much of Santa Barbara speaking Spanish.
Oh, and the Pentecostal movement in the Spanish
Pentecostal movement. There are non-denominational churches that are renting spaces, that are moving chairs, it's really cumbersome on them. What if we opened up our space and shared it?
You may run into resistance. Well, these are ideas.
These are ideas,
yeah.
and the interim holds up ideas, and if it's an idea they run with and it doesn't work, then they can blame it on the interim because the interim's going out the door.
Well, I'll tell you afterwards an idea I had that kind of got shot down. you talk about housing, but we'll go on from there. We do some of the ministries that are there, but I'm not sure how aggressive we are about them. We have a place, I think it's for 6 cars to park overnight. I forget the name of that. For homeless people who are living in their cars, safe haven. And I haven't noticed it used a lot lately. I don't know if it's because the bureaucracy that distributes these has too many places for people to park their car off the street, or whether we haven't reached out as much as we used to. We have a great couple in our church, Bert and Willoughby, and he was very active in this. We have our warming shelter.
Yes.
And I cause...
Well, the Willoughbys are a wonderful example because they have turned their home in Montecito over to God's purposes. So they welcome Presby Camp, they welcome a church picnic on Labor Day, and
Willoughby World.
Willoughby World, and maybe the future of the church is to have us all open up our homes, and maybe the ministry will be done off campuses much more. The ministry should be done more off campus than on campus.
Well, and on the other hand, maybe more family, maybe more of our homes should be brought into this 45,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It has been since I returned to the church, this church 10 years ago, and I came back because it wasn't the only church I've ever attended. Other Presbyterian churches, going back to Calvary Pres in San Francisco when I was 2 years old.
Wonderful church.
As I looked around the community, this church, and I visited several others that I knew, was the one that you couldn't walk across a parking lot without 5 or 6 people saying hello to you who never, what? You don't know me. Very friendly and very outgoing.
I remind people that the church is our home, our spiritual home. If somebody were to walk to your front door and walk into your living room, you'd say hello to them. Somebody who drives onto our campus or walks on our campus, we need to welcome them and say hello. Hello, I'm Charles Svendsen. Who are you? Welcome to our church. We're glad you're here. Now, you run the risk that you're going to welcome somebody who's been there for 25 years. You'll just have to say, I'm new here, I don't know. But I would rather err on the side of welcoming than being cautious about,
We have a dear family in our church who's had a tragedy. And I happen to know them, this would be 6 or 8 years ago. And I saw the father and son sitting in the same aisle with me the week after we had prayed because of the loss of another son. And I made sure I went right to Peter Bueller and told him, and I talked to the person, and become devoted, helpful part of our community.
Well, the church really, in the end, is a family, isn't it? And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12 that when one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. And when one part of the body rejoices, we all rejoice. So we go to people during our prayer time and during the times that we just see people on the campus, and we say, I'm so sorry for your loss.
How can we help?
How can we help? You would talk about my brothers and sisters. I lost my brother 3 months ago at age 63 to pancreatic cancer. And he was a Baptist pastor. And his church surrounded him and my sister-in-law, Susie, with love and prayers and grace. And then he moved to Portland 18 months ago, and 300 people came to his memorial service. He had made that many friends in Portland through homeless ministry, through his church, through a Chinese church he was preaching at. So the church in the end is family.
Well, our warming shelter, interesting experience. I am aggressive against the vagrant criminal homeless. I've had 19 arrested, and I know how to do it, and I stay right there till the police show up, and I insist they arrest them, or I'll make a citizen's arrest. And so first time I went to work at our warming shelter, I went in and Bert was there, Bert Willoughby, and I said, Bert, if one of these people that I've had arrested comes in tonight, he says, "You won't do anything." I said, "No, I'll slip out the back door quietly. I'll tell you," because they would be a problem person. I've probably only, because of my schedule, only in years, I admit, served at the warming shelter 5 or 6 times. I've probably seen 300, 400 different people. Not one was, not alone did I have arrested, but was any of the troublemakers on State Street. So we are that warming shelter system is serving a real need, and they are so
ministry.
thankful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we are trying to, we feed the homeless in Alameda Park.
Yeah.
And we've worked with the
Well, I think that's the future of our church or any faith-based community, that if we don't outreach and look out for people and do ministry outside of our 4 walls, then we're just going to collapse on ourselves in the next 20 years.
Well, besides that, we're worthless. You know, just taking care of our own is not what the Lord preached.
Yeah.
You know.
But I would beg to differ that we are, in God's eyes, we're made in God's image, so we are worthwhile to go.
No, I mean as a institution.
Got it.
And
The institutions come and go. The church remains.
Right.
There's no Presbyterian church in England now.
Yeah.
It's long gone.
The interesting thing that crossed my mind as we were talking is early in his ministry, Christ sent, I think it was 70 disciples out into the world.
Yeah, two by two.
2 by 2. And so it's there is a clear calling there to reach out into the world.
Yeah.
We're going to run out of time soon. Got about a minute to go. Any thoughts on what you're going to be doing in the next month or two?
Right. Tonight I'm meeting with our pastor nominating committee, and I'm saying you've got an interim now, so take a breath, be deliberate. I'm here with you for a year, so we're going to do good ministry together. And I'm just going to assure the congregation in the next 2 or 3 months that leadership is present, that God's Spirit is here, and that we're looking forward to the next few months together.
You and I, you have hit off with me in that a couple of things in our first, I was gone for 2 weeks after you came on, and in the first I noticed your focus on prayer.
Yeah.
And I guess you're going to preach on that this Sunday.
I am. I'm going to preach on the Lord's Prayer this Sunday.
The ask and you shall receive, which I need. You quoted that's
last week in the Service for Wholeness, right?
And I noticed a clear delineation of the Trinity.
Yes.
In your.
I'm so delighted that you're staying awake for these things, Jim.
We're out of time.